Hey, welcome to Chapter 3, Section 4. We are talking about the quadratic formula. You should have your notebooks out. You should have your textbook open to page 122. This might be familiar. It might be a long time since you've done the quadratic formula. So let this be a refresher for some and maybe something new for others. All right, so we're on page 122. We're going to take some good organized notes. This is the final way we're going to learn about solving quadratic equations, right? X squared quadratic equations. Okay, I'm going to switch to my document cam. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do page 122 to 123, numbers 1, 2, and 6, and then you're going to do 3, 4, and 5 when we're done. That way you get the practice. Really, to be honest, can you identify the different parts of a quadratic equation? So, number 1, I apologize, I'm looking back at my textbook. Here's our question. All right, first thing you want to look for, and this is something you might want to write down, do we have an equals 0 by itself? That's important. If we don't, we can't solve. If we do, then that means the coefficient of x squared is our a, the coefficient of x is our b, and c is our constant. And of course, you might remember the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All we got to do is plug and play. Okay. X equals the opposite of b. B is negative 6. The opposite of b is positive 6. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. It's going to be positive 36 one way or the other. Minus 4. Now I always put in my parentheses for a and c. 1 times 4. All over. Now 2a I do in my head. 2a, 2 times 1 is 2. So you can see I did some stuff in my head anyway. Opposite of b I did in my head. I changed the sign. B squared I did in my head. You can use a calculator if you need to. But I did not do minus 4ac in my head, and I did do 2a in my head. We got to simplify. So we got 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. Notice I'm not simplifying much right now. 36 minus 16. All over 2. We're going to keep going. 6 plus or minus the square root of, what is that? 20 all over 2. Ooh, all right. 20 is one of those special numbers. Okay, so as we have hopefully said to ourselves, or you've at least heard your teacher say a bajillion times by now, what's the biggest perfect square? Well, it's 4. 4 times what is 5? What's the biggest perfect square? 4. 4 times 5 is 20. All right, what's the square root of 4? It's 2. So where do we write it? We write it in front of the parenthesis. Do we know the square root of 5? Nope, it stays trapped all over 2. Rewind that. Play it again if you need to hear that logic. Well, it's not really logic if you need to hear that thought process, that story. All right, now, if we were in class, I would be doing it differently, but this is online. So here we go, the mathematical way. What's the greatest common factor between 6 and 2? It's 2, right? So we can take out a 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 2 rad 5 divided by 2 is rad 5. We still have all over 2. Oh, and then look, all over 2 cancels out. So what's our answer? 3 plus or minus rad 5. All right, can't see that. A lot of work. I kept it organized over here. You might have notes for yourself. You might want to rewind and watch it again so that you can add in notes for yourself, because if you're just staring at the math, you're probably not doing it right. Okay, Next up, I said I was going to do number 2. Ooh, they tried to trick us, but we're not going to get tricked. Okay, number 2. Now, you have your textbook, so you didn't need to wait for me to see what it was. Okay, do we have an equal 0 all by itself on one side? No, so we got to go ahead, bring that to the other side. It doesn't have any friends, so of course, it's just going to be 2x squared plus 7x plus 4, and then we have our very important equals 0. Remember, we are finding the x-intercepts, just in a different way. Okay, let's label our A, a B, and C. All right, can we do it without writing down the quadratic formula? If you don't know the quadratic formula, you might want to write it up here in the top margin. It's a great habit. You don't really need to memorize the quadratic formula. You just need to see it over and over again so that it becomes memorized. There's a slight difference. All right. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4A C all over 2A. Take a moment. Rewind if you need to. How did I do that so quickly? Okay. Now notice, for those of you that are still a little confused about how to simplify things, notice what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything different each time. We're going to go underneath the square root, and I'm just doing minus 4AC. So 8 times 4 is 32, all over 4. Okay, now I can do 49 minus 32. If you're using a calculator and you're using it correctly, I have no problem with you plugging in b squared minus 4ac all at once and knowing that it's 17. But you know, that's if you're using a calculator and you're using it correctly. So we got 49 minus 32. I'm just double checking my work real quick. 49 minus 32, 49 minus 30 is 19, take away another 2 is 17. Ooh, all right, so you think to yourself, what's the biggest perfect square? 17 is a prime number. There's our answer. Nothing can be simplified. There's nothing that we're going to factor out of the numerator. All right, that was that. Sweet. Not so bad. And we're skipping now to page 123, number 6, before you do some on your own for practice. That way you have an opportunity to ask me questions when you see me. All right. Looks like you're trying to trick us. We're not going to get tricked. Okay, except I don't particularly like having a leading coefficient of a negative. You know, this is the x squared. This will be our first term. So I'm actually going to move everything over here. Notice that negative 7x squared, when it gets added to the other side, is going to be positive. 3x, we're going to take away 5x. Question that you can answer to yourself. Doesn't matter. As long as everything's correct, doesn't matter which side of the equal sign I took it to. All right, we can identify our A, our B, and our C. So x equals, oh, see, it's still in the margin. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Got to go inside the radical. Ooh, 16 times 7. I'm sure it's something like 102, but I don't really trust myself right now. 112. I said something like, you know, can you give me credit? 102 didn't really sound right anyway. All right, now we got 4 take away 112. Ooh. Ooh la la. So that would be 4 minus 112 would be negative 108 all over 14. And I'm honestly doing it in the calculator just because I want to make sure I'm right. I don't feel like redoing this video. All right, so we got 2 plus or minus the square root of, a negative, so we can take the negative out, but I'm going to go over here. Let's start doing a little bit of work. You're going to ask yourself, what's the biggest perfect square? So you might think 4, right? 4 times what gets you 108? Well, 108 divided by 4 is 27. Oh, but 27 has a perfect square in there as well. 27 is 9 times 3. So our biggest perfect square is 4 times 9, which is 36. So this breaks down into the square root of negative 36 times 3. If this is something that you're uncomfortable with, and I'm going to tell you, if you're watching this, there is a 50% chance that this is something you're uncomfortable with, based on my experience. Okay, normal, right? I'm using a calculator to guess and check. If you're uncomfortable with this, you need to get a calculator somewhere, computer, phone is, I prefer use like a simulator then, or an emulator, I mean, or actual calculator, and start guessing your perfect squares. Divide 108 by your perfect squares. You got to think of the biggest perfect square, 36 in this case. Now, I didn't get to it directly. 4, realize there's still a 9. 4 times 9 is 36. Go ahead, check my work. It's 36 times 3, going to be 108. Bet you it is. 36 times 3, 108. All right, so but it's a negative 36. All right, what's the square root of negative 36? It's 6i, right? Square root of a negative is I, square root of 36 is 6. Do you know the square root of 3? Nope, stays underneath, all over 14. Okay, look at the numerator. Does a 2 and a 6 have something in common? Yes, it does. We're going to factor out a 2. We're left with 1 plus or minus 3i rad 3. Don't believe me? You shouldn't. Check your work. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 3i rad 3 is 6i rad 3. Oh, and then look at that. 2 goes into 14 7 times. So my answer is x equals, I'm going to put an arrow because it's kind of silly to have x equal that equals x. X equals 1 plus or minus 3i rad 3 all over 7. All right, there's a lot. You have the ability to rewind, you have the ability to look it again, and you are going to practice, what did I say before? Numbers 3, 4, and 5. We are going to get more practice with this because it really is just matching up terms and then doing the right type of simplification at the right time. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and do 3, 4, and 5, and I'll be asking you for your answers eventually.